And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and it is the best day of the week because it is the day that the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the vice president of the Heartland Institute and the host of this here program. And speaking of that, there is nothing else like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere online. So I hope you will like, share, and subscribe and leave your comments under this video, because all of that helps convince YouTube's biased algorithm to nonetheless smile upon this program and to get the show in front of even more people. And a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. What a shock. And actually, we're going to get to that later in the show. So if you want to support this program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for the Climate Realism Show. And you can help us make sure that this show keeps being made every single Friday. Any support you can give us is warmly welcomed and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank today, as we do before every show, our streaming partners. That would be junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, and What's Up With That. This here program is streaming on their X accounts right now. And so hello to everybody on Elon Musk's now free X platform. Today, as usual, we have with us Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That. Also, H. Sterling Burnett, Director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And Linnea Lukin, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. And we are so happy to welcome back again to the program a very special guest, Steve Milloy. He is the author of several books, including Scare Pollution, How and Why to Fix the EPA, which we're going to get to again in a minute. Green Hell, How Environmentalists Plan to Control Your Life and What You Can Do to Stop Them. And what is maybe my favorite title of his books, and this one goes back a ways, Junk Science Judo, Self-Defense Against Health Scares and Scams. Steve Milloy, you're also the climate hoax slayer at Junk Science on X. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Jim.
So great to have you with us. And of course, Steve was also a member of the first Trump administration's EPA transition team. And who knows, maybe he will be again in a few weeks. We should be so lucky. Steve is also a member of the Heartland Institute's board of directors and a policy advisor to us on climate and energy policy. So good to have you here. Right before we're all backstage before the show goes live, and we were chatting about the election and about the changes in climate and energy policy that may be upcoming, depending in 2025, depending on the outcome of that election. Looking forward to getting to that as our main topic for today. But before we get into that, we are going to get into Anthony Watts' favorite segment, and that is Crazy Climate News of the Week. Hit it, Andy.
I never get tired of watching that.
I know. It's supposed to be full screen. I was supposed to show my top of my hair there at the end of that. I don't know what happened with that thing, but yes, that's always fun.
At least you didn't set your hair on fire, right?
No, at all. Yeah, it could have been pretty dangerous for sure. All right, here we go. So our first item this week is from Yahoo News, and the story's headline: Could global warming make our winter weather worse? New study offers insights. The new study finds that abnormally warm temperatures in the Arctic could bring cold air outbreaks and heavy snowfall to North America. Nor'easters, blizzards, Arctic outbreaks, the dreaded polar vortex, winter's arsenal of misery is on its way, ready or not. And against this backdrop of winter's imminent arrival comes a new study that says unusual heat in the Arctic caused by global warming is bringing more of the fierce winter weather we loathe here in the United States. Speak for yourself. Specifically, the study finds that abnormally warm temperatures in the Arctic are associated with cold air outbreaks and heavy snowfalls here in North America. Quote, in recent decades, the warming in the Arctic has been much faster than in the rest of the world, a phenomenon known as Arctic amplification, the study said. Numerous other studies report that the Arctic is warming either twice, more than twice, or even 3 or 4 times as fast as the rest of the globe on average. This faster pace of warming is often attributed to the melting of sea ice, according to the World Wildlife Fund. Well, okay. As sea ice disappears, it is replaced by a growing expanse of dark ocean water that absorbs sunlight rather than reflecting it. I could go on, but I don't want to. Steve, I believe the slogan of your website is all the junk that's fit to debunk. So we're going to give you first crack at pointing out the junk science on display and all the assumptions in this story already.
I think they have to explain why Arctic sea ice, at the minimum was the same as it was in 2012. I mean, since 2012, we've had probably, I don't know, close to 700 billion tons of emissions. Where is the warming? This claim that the Arctic is warming 4 times faster. I looked into that a little bit this weekend. I'm not really. I don't think there's any there for that. There's hardly any surface stations. A lot of guesswork going into that. I think it's just more climate hoax.
I would point out, as importantly, is I just wish the climate models don't change. The emission scenarios don't change. I wish they would just, across them, have a consistent output. Because I've heard for decades, we'll soon see the end of snow because of global warming. That we'll no longer have winter because of global warming. Kids won't know what it's like to make snowballs or to make snow, to throw snowballs or make snowmen. So is it the end of snow or is it worse winters? And how does warming cause worse winters? Did we never have a polar vortex before or nor'easters? I suspect we did. Oh, wait, I know we did. So it's get your story straight, stick to it. And then when it's debunked, but don't keep switching back and forth to which, it's like playing whack-a-mole with these guys.
I would point out that the term polar vortex has only recently been popularized in the media because it sounds scary. But, it goes all the way back to 1853. And if you take a look at our Climate at a Glance website, we have a section on the polar vortex, which was named in the Washington Post story as the cause of all of this. And the key takeaways are the phrase polar vortex is erroneously used by the media to link climate change and severe weather events. It was first identified as a cause for some instances of severe winter weather events in 1853. Claims that climate change is creating new and more severe polar vortex events are not supported by either observational evidence or computer climate models. So there. I mean, it's just more scary rhetoric from people in the media that don't have a clue what they're talking about.
Well, right. You've got reporters, you've got climate reporters that have to report on something. They have to turn out content every day. They have their marching orders. They're supposed to talk about scary climate change, incorporate it into as many stories as they can. So I think this is part of that too.
And Anthony, you correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that even Kevin Trenberth has run away from this idea that warming is causing the polar vortex. I believe he did it in a Nature commentary 10 years ago when this really sort of first.
Right. But the media never got the memo. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, the way this story was phrased, the phrasing in this story reminded me, of how you see all those series of stories where like Finland is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the globe, and Canada is warming like 1,000 places on Earth are all warming at higher than an average rate when that is really statistically impossible.
just go look at on the GIST website, the Goddard Institute for Space Studies. They've got this globe, shows you where all their surface stations are. You can go, move the globe around and look at what they have in the Arctic, and there's really hardly anything there. I mean, it's really just made up stuff.
I don't think it's that the Post didn't get the memo, Steve. I think it's that they only publish things from Trenberth or Mann or anybody else when it supports a single narrative.
Yeah.
And when they disavow or say something different, look, I cover studies in climate change weekly every week. Studies that say that recently a study said that a lot of the warming can be attributed to poor maintenance of surface station boxes, and other things. Another study came out recently talking about the saturation effect. It's not just Will Happer and them talking about it, other, peer-reviewed literature, but that goes against the narrative. And so the Post isn't reporting on those studies, and neither are the rest of the mainstream media.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole hoax is based on the notion that, the truth just goes around the world before, the lie shoots around the world before, the truth gets out of bed. Yeah. And we're at the point now where, okay, we're out of bed, and it's pretty easy to dismantle the whole lie. It wasn't so easy in the beginning, but it's getting easier every day.
And don't forget that very deep-pocketed left-wing nonprofit philanthropy groups are funding nothing but climate alarmist coverage in places like the Associated Press and the Washington Post. This is bought and paid for alarmism. That's why you don't get any balanced coverage. That's why what? That is correct. Every single story is a complete panic show, and it's paid for that way. All right.
Yeah, it's not the panic show. It's the climate gong show.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, we don't have Chuck Barris here to hit that gong for us. Anyway, we usually save questions for the end, and I do encourage everyone to get their questions in. So we'll have Q&A at the end. But I thought I'd just pull this up right now as we're talking about it. That's from Bo Gus. I get it, Bo Gus. He asks, has anyone actually mapped the Arctic temps during a winter cold snap?
Well, I'm sure they have, but here's the problem. Andy had that map up showing the globe of the world. If we can go back to that, I want to point out something really important. That's Antarctica. Flip it around to the other side. There we go. There's the Arctic. Stop right there. Now look at Canada. We've got all these widely spaced stations. There isn't a single station at the North Pole. Zilch, zero, nada. Unlike down in Antarctica, where they actually have one at the South Pole. But here's the deal. As you go further north, the stations get sparser and sparser. And as a result, they have to extrapolate the temperature from these across large distances, up to 1,200 kilometers at NASA guess. And so as a result, what you have is one station can buy us half of the Arctic. And in the case of a station like at Eureka in Nunavut, this is a small habitat of human habitation. And they have to have energy there to stay alive. And so waste energy from their encampment actually makes it into the thermometer. But even worse, they're in a situation where they're near a mountain, and fawn winds or katabatic winds come down slope and create a huge warming effect. It has absolutely nothing to do with climate. It may last 2 or 3 hours, and it will cause the high temperature spike to go up 20 to 30 degrees, or maybe as high as 50 degrees above normal for that area. And of course, that gets recorded in the climate database, even though it has nothing to do with climate. It's a weather event. And so the data that we're getting from these Arctic stations is highly suspect. And plotting them, yeah, you can plot them, but it doesn't really make a hill of beans worth of difference in the whole scheme of things, because the data itself is suspect.
Yeah. This is why people should tune into the Climate Realism Show every Friday. Look at the kind of stuff you learn. And producer Andy, fantastic work finding that map that turned into another little talking point for us. So they're very, very good. All right. Let's move on to our second item. This is from a wonderfully titled media outlet called Motor Biscuit. Electric truck fire burns down brand new German fire station. The Feuerwehr station, Stadeltondorf, is new, really new. In fact, the new fire station opened its bay doors less than 1 year ago. The station could accommodate 10 fire engines and many firefighters. However, a tragic fire destroyed the fire station despite its firefighting purposes. According to Euronews, the fire originated with, quote, an emergency vehicle belonging to the fire department which contained lithium-ion batteries and an external power connection. Unfortunately, the electric emergency's vehicle blaze destroyed at least 10 fire truck models and caused around 25 million euros in damage. Now, firefighters' woes and electric vehicles aren't a new phenomenon. Departments in the United States have different tactics for battling EV battery fires. Ideally, first responders can suppress EV fires with mass quantities of water. However, some firefighters claim that depending on the circumstances, it's best to cordon off the area and allow the EV to burn and eventually, I guess, burn itself out. Well, so, Sterling, I'll start with you here. Allowing a fire to burn itself out took out, in this case, 10 useful life-saving fire trucks and caused 27 or 25 million euros in damage.
Where to start?
Really,
with the idiocy of this particular story. Having an EV fire truck, for one, having it plugged in, with all we know about fires from these things, having it plugged into your station. But, the stupidity, in one sense, started even before then. Brand new fire station. I guess firefighters just think, well, we're firefighters, so we're immune. Has no fire alarms? Had no fire suppression system.
Well, we don't need fire alarms. We have fire experts right there.
Exactly. Badges with fire alarms. We don't need no stinking fire alarms. We're firefighters.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're thinking. So the first truck goes up in flames. Okay. Are they all just sort of compacted around it? Were none of them far enough away for you to go over and drive them out of the garage as a brave firefighter? Was nobody in the firehouse, despite the fact that all the trucks were there?
They might have been sleeping.
I just don't know what to say about this story. But, so it's like you've got the error with no smoke alarms, evidently no fire suppression system, or at least not one geared to fight electric vehicle fires, which should tell you something right there. You've got electric vehicle, a fire vehicle plugged in indoors in an enclosed space next to vehicles that I presume have diesel in them. It was a Murphy's disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, as I'm fond of saying, and it's very apt in this case, the stupid, it burns.
Yeah.
It really did.
It did.
You can bet they're not going to buy any more electric fire trucks. I can tell you that.
For firefighters not to be prepared, I don't think water works on EV battery. I mean, you need something else. And if you've ever driven past one of these vehicle fires, it's really warm. It's a lot warmer than a regular fire. The fact that they're not prepared is just, when this starts happening in the United States, there's going to be a real problem. When people's homes start going up.
Well, they have, unfortunately, ask the people in New York where these things have started fires and taken down tenement buildings. So I'd like to think it's killing people. I'd like to think that, 10 or 15 years ago, I gave a presentation, Texas Public Policy Foundation, that they would come to their senses on coal, that they would not shut down baseload coal because it would cause unreliability problems. I was wrong. People are that stupid. Well, I would like to think that the first time someone dies because of an electric vehicle fire, and it happens multiple times again, the Consumer Product Safety Commission gets involved and says, you know what? These aren't safe on the roads. These aren't safe in your house. It's time to withdraw them until we fix this problem. But I would be wrong about that. People are that stupid, or they're just that bought in to the climate scare narrative and the need to do something, even if it kills your neighbors or yourself.
Yeah, no, certainly that's a great point with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. In the 1980s, they banned lawn darts pretty quickly. Lawn darts had killed a few, people throwing them at kids and stuff, had killed a few people. But e-bikes, for example, have killed a lot more just in New York City alone.
Yeah.
Killed a bunch, and they're still on the market.
Still on the market.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, most. Sorry,
no, go ahead.
most of the e-bikes that have gone up. I can't say all of them, but I know a few of the big stories about the e-bikes were from people modifying them. This isn't to say that they can't or won't spontaneously combust, because they can and they will, and as has been shown, especially if the battery is damaged. But you know, people like to get past the limiters. I know certain people who may or may not have battery powered like golf carts that enjoy modifying them in order to get them to go beyond the speed limiter that's installed in them, and that kind of tends to be what compromises the battery.
Well,
Yeah, but this is happening.
You can't put it out. Yeah.
No, but you know, all this kind of stuff is foreseeable. People fool with stuff. You know, lawn darts. You can use lawn darts safely, but they were banned. You can use an e-bike safely. I mean, you can have, but people are still going to fool with it, and bad things are going to happen. And to innocent people, not the user necessarily. I mean, there are a raft of stories where, you know, someone has left their e-bike, their modified e-bike or whatever, plugged in like the entry vestibule, but the whole place goes up and kills people that are, you know, not the owners.
It's not just the people that fiddle with it, though. I mean, you know, when the e-bike thing broke out in a first floor sales e-bike sales store in India, no one had fiddled with those bikes.
That's embarrassing. Yeah,
it caught fire and killed people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry, the Biden administration is pushing, has subsidized, and people have bought into it, electric school buses. They're putting their children on death traps. And you know what? Just last week, the Biden administration said, oh, no, we're doing a recall on those. We got to recall those. Something like 300 buses have already been put out there. You were endangering children when you did it. Now you've recalled them. What are they going to have to go back to? And that's a real question, because in a lot of these programs, you have to scrap your old bus when you get an e-bus. You have to get rid of it, and not on the resale market. It has to be destroyed because they don't want it out there spewing emissions. So what do you do when your electric bus has been recalled, but you've already scrapped your diesel bus?
Yeah. And we have to remember why all this madness is even happening. And that's because this is supposedly going to save the earth from the awful effects of human activity and life on this planet. That we have to go to all e-bikes and all e-trucks because that's the way to save the planet. And instead, we see what the results are. So, and none of it is necessary, for sure. All right, let's move on to item number 3 in crazy climate news of the week. And this one was a favorite of Anthony's. He shared this earlier in the week, so here it is. From CNN, scientists say the slime in your dishwasher could unlock a solution to global warming. Scientists have scoured the depths of the ocean and outer space for microbes to help slow global warming. They're now looking at a new and unlikely place inside your home. A group called Two Frontiers Project, funded by biotech company Seed Health, is asking people in the United States to look for, quote, weird microbial growth at home in a quest to find the next microorganism that could suck planet-heating carbon dioxide from the air or help break down environmental pollutants. Extremophile microbes thrive in harsh environments and develop unique properties, which can be harnessed by the biotech industry and used in climate solutions, says the executive director of that company. Though microbes live on every home surface, the group is especially interested in those that live in more extreme environments, including places with high temperatures, such as dishwashers, air conditioners, microwaves, solar panels, hot water heaters, and shower heads. Volunteers who sign up to the Extremophile campaign will be asked to take photos of any microbial growth around their home. Quote, think slime, crusty mats, stringy growth, the project's website prompts, and answer the questions about what you see. All right, I'm not going to read anymore because this is getting really gross. Anthony, this really is gross, and it reminded you of a movie you've seen.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. Yeah, you know what's going to happen, right? So they're going to find the perfect slime organism that takes CO2 and converts it to even more slime. And so they're going to then say, okay, well, we need to we need to enhance its slime making and CO2 grabbing capabilities. So they're going to engineer a super slime microbe. You just know it's coming, and it's going to save the earth. But see, here's the problem. The more CO2 this thing absorbs, the more slime gets generated. And what's going to happen? Well, we've already seen this movie back in 1958, right? Remember this movie, some of you? The Blob?
There it is. Yep.
There it is. It's literally slime that's gone amok, right? And that's what we're going to end up with if these scientists go super engineer, super slime CO2 eating, systems. We're going to have the blob all over again.
So what you're saying, Anthony, is that in the end, it was the blob that was the good guy, that aliens sent the blob to Earth to reduce our CO2 levels, in part by eating CO2 emitting people. And
that's the carbon that they want to get rid of, right?
So it turns out it's the hero of the movie, and we've misunderstood it all this time.
Right. Steve McQueen was way off base with his whole thing.
Yeah. Well,
I'm thinking as long as this ends up like the Blob or like that one Goosebumps story about the like slime can that was growing in the bathtub. As long as it turns out like that, and this isn't like The Thing, where you have some horrible creature.
Anthony, I don't understand this. What is it with dishwashers? I mean, if they're looking for green stuff that absorbs CO2, we already have oceans full of it, right?
Yeah. It's called algae.
It's called,
We also have
what's my dishwasher got to do with it?
And personally, I don't want to see green slime in my dishwasher. And I don't want to see it elsewhere in my home. Next, they're going to come out and say, oh, black mold has gotten a bad rap. It's actually, absorbing CO2. So you need to not get rid of it in your home before you sell it. You should use it as there you go. Use the black mold as a green selling point for your home.
Yeah. Well, here's the problem.
This is my carbon capture black mold over here.
Okay, here's the problem, Sterling. The Biden administration has been cracking down on appliances. So now the dishwashers are going to be green and energy efficient and use less water. So they may not be able to generate enough slime to save the planet. That's going to be the problem in the future, right? Let's see the blob in action.
Get yourself some phosphate tablets and put it in your dish.
Oh, that's the 1986 movie, not the original 1958, but it's still relevant. The blob. You're muted, Jim.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I had 5 seconds to find a blob clip on Twitter and then get it downloaded. So yeah, I got the 86 version, but it's still pretty good. I do remember seeing the original 1955 or 56 Steve McQueen movie. And when I was a little boy, it was scary, but I'm actually scared of this idea that we're going to now be scouring our homes for, a life or planet saving microbe. And then, the whole thing seems like a terrible idea to me, and funny too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, right. Well, what's really going to be cool is the people that the Just Stop Oil people will get pieces of this blob and they'll use it to, weld themselves to the street or something with the blob.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
I'm gonna eat them first.
Thank God.
We call this segment Crazy Climate News of the Week for a reason, and that we seem to be able to find something that out crazies last week every single week. So
you remember they used to have something called pet rocks. Someone actually was buying rocks as pets. Well, now the voluntary extinction movement. What's the name of the group that does that?
Extinction Rebellion.
Extinction Rebellion. They can adopt a pet blob.
It's still difficult to take out for a walk on a leash, but they can probably figure it out.
Well, all right. They won't be around long enough to worry about walking on a leash if it's the right blob.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, let's get to our meme of the week here. And this also comes from Anthony Watts, who shared it in our company Slack this week. The choice is simple. Your ice engine won't start, get a new $125 battery. If your EV engine won't start, get a new $30,000 battery. And I was driving around today, and I was wondering why my Waze application was actually taking me in a weird way to get home, avoiding this freeway that I usually take. And then when I got back on the freeway and looked behind me, I saw that there was a car on the side of the road that was smoking and in flames. And I slowed down and got a good look at it, and it was an electric vehicle. So on the side of the road, that the fire department was just standing there watching burn. They didn't really know what to do with it. Yeah, they're too hot. Yeah, and that's what happens there. All right. So we're going to get into our main topic today, which is basically the politics of climate policy and the presidential election and what may happen after the election. But before we get too deep into that, I want to point out to our audience that you must follow Steve Milloy on X. His account is @JunkScience. Yeah. He is prolific, and many times a day, you will find interesting things that he's brought up for discussion, usually junk that he will debunk. But Anthony, again, suggested we bring a few up on screen, and we'll have you talk about them, Steve. This one here, breaking news, global warming will be twice as bad as predicted. I thought it was already bad. Now it's going to be twice as bad. This is very, very discouraging news. Earth is on track for a catastrophic 3.1 degrees Celsius of warming this century, UN warns.
Yeah. So look, these guys have never been right about anything. And when they double down, it's just 2 times 0 is 0. So, it's just amazing to me, even for themselves. I guess they count on their audience just being too stupid for words and not having any memory. They're always wrong. They're never right. And they keep doubling down. And I think this is coming to an end, but, we're going to have to go through an awful lot before it's over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so 3.1, where is that? Because I thought it was, we had to keep it under 1.5 C. And then there are models that go from anywhere from 3 to was it 5 degrees Celsius by 2021?
All this is just, it's just ridiculous stuff. I mean, there's no such thing as a global temperature to start with. All these temperatures are just really made up. We have an average of made up temperatures. It's all nonsense. I mean, you could spend hours debunking every aspect of that, but I just am going, the shortest distances, they've never been right. They're never going to be right.
Yeah. All right. We'll bring up another one here. Andy, this one is the UN's verdict on climate progress over the past year. There was none. So don't say that Steve doesn't, always share bad news. This is actually good news, I guess.
Yeah. So, how many trillions have been spent in the last year? How much alarmism has there been? And even the UN admits nothing's been accomplished. And, if you go into this report, which is my favorite annual UN report, it's the emissions gap report. It tells you how much they failed every year. And they have this graph in there. I think I posted on my X feed yesterday, showing from 1990 through last year, how emissions have just gone up basically at the same rate. I mean, they have had absolutely no impact on anything, although they've been scaring us for decades and spending trillions and trillions of dollars, which, if we're going to spend money, could go into solving real environmental problems or other problems that are real. But instead, we're just wasting it on this climate cult. And it's just gross.
Yeah. Well, there's one more thing that I wanted to bring up, and I mean, well, you said in that tweet that the climate hoax is essentially dead, and I know that Donald Trump has used the term hoax, and you give yourself credit for popularizing that with him, and I think you should.
No. Well, no. Let me look. All of us have been involved in this for a long time. Anthony, Sterling, you, and others of our friends. We've been doing this for decades. Trump picked it up from all of us collectively. More than 10 years ago, and so we're on the verge of electing a guy who thinks climate is a hoax. I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment that we don't really get credit for.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we now we're going to flow into how this presidential election may affect climate policy and climate communications, really, and I think really the global climate agenda. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. It could be at serious risk. But the first story I wanted to mention, actually involves the Heartland Institute. And this is from AFP, the global wire service. Google urged to step up efforts to demonetize climate falsehoods. Says here, civil society groups implored Google on Thursday, so this was just yesterday, to rigorously enforce its policy to demonetize environmental disinformation, saying ads placed alongside climate denial content persistently popped up despite the tech titans' pledge to crack down. The open letter, addressed to Google chief Sundar Pichai and endorsed by thousands of signatories, comes in the wake of major hurricanes in the United States, sparking an avalanche of disinformation, and just weeks before the UN COP29 climate summit. In 2021, Google announced a policy prohibiting ads alongside content that denied the existence and causes of climate change, seeking to ensure disinformation peddlers cannot monetize its influential platforms, including YouTube. But the letter, signed from a dozen groups, including the Union of Concerned Scientists and the Tech Watchdog Center for Countering Digital Hate, said the ads have not stopped. While Google has demonetized some content by the Heartland Institute, that's us, a conservative U.S. think tank, watchdogs have continued to find ads alongside its misleading climate messaging on YouTube, the letter said. I can report that I haven't seen it, but if it is happening, I think we earned 2 cents. I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was a glitch. I looked up in the back end of our channel. I think we made 2 cents in September. So that was a mistake. It urged Google to, quote, immediately and permanently demonetize the Heartland Institute, unquote, as well as other outlets that spread climate disinformation. We can go on with this. I can stop there, but you get the idea. And the reason I'm bringing this up, not just to, kind of humble brag about the fact that the Heartland Institute is the #1 target for the climate censors around the globe, that they're singling us out in a letter to Google to shut us down, which they've already done. It is that if Kamala Harris is elected as president of the United States, she is on the record many times talking about how quote unquote misinformation and disinformation needs to be stopped on places like X and Facebook and YouTube. And so, Donald and the Biden-Harris administration has the Twitter files exposed this. They were for a long time collaborating with collaborating is one word for it, with the social media companies, telling them that this piece of information, I don't like it. We don't like it here in the regime, and so you must take it down. And if you don't, there could be consequences. That was the very clear and sometimes explicit communication from the administration to social media platforms. There is a single one right now, and that's X, that will not collaborate with the government to silence speech that the regime doesn't like. But if Kamala Harris gets elected, you could expect, I would imagine, Steve Milloy, that the climate censorship apparatus will crank down even harder.
Well, look, I mean, they're trying to crack down on Musk, right? So they're investigating him for all, from EVs to election interference to all kinds of illegal election contributions. They're going to come after him. They are coming after him. And, and I got to say something about X. X is much better now than it was before Musk bought them. But I think there's still some internal suppression of climate skeptics on X. I think we all have difficulty getting our message out. There's just some cadre of techs there that are, keeping us down. And I hope that Elon can one day flush these people out. Elon is open to other points of view. He's supporting Trump. Trump wants to end the EV mandate, which would help Elon. But he's supporting him anyway because he, understands there are much bigger things at stake. But and by the way, Google has also demonetized me. And then every time I make a video, put it on my website, I actually put it up on Google as well. I get this little Google screen saying climate change is real. Don't believe this guy.
Oh yeah, that's the tag that's on the bottom of every one of our videos.
Let me ask about something about this demonetization. They say they don't want ads to run alongside our work or climate skeptics, climate realists' work. What if there are companies that actually want their ads to run? It's like there's a market, there's an untapped market there that you might be able to reach if you advertise next to people like us. What if they go to Google and say, we want our ads run there?
Yeah.
And how do you know that hasn't happened? Maybe that's why, to the extent that we got 2 cents in September, maybe that's because there are some places that say, look, there's a market there for this stuff.
Well, and in fact,
we want to reach that market.
I mean, if we're a problem that we need to be demonetized, we must be making some money from somebody, right? So there's some demand there, but they don't really care. I mean, it's almost like, they've got a lock on market share. They no longer care about capitalism, freedom. Now it's time to just squash us.
It's like the old bomber saying, if you're not catching flack, you're not over the target.
Mm.
Yeah.
Has anyone, was this directed at Steve, this question? Has Elon taken up your offer for a debate? I don't recall us taking that.
No, I don't think he's going to do that either.
No,
I don't mean to pick on him, but sometimes he says some really dumb things about climate. I mean, he's such a smart guy. He's a brilliant guy, right? He can land a rocket and sketch it.
Yeah.
But you put him in front of a video and ask him in front of a camera and ask him about climate, he's just going to say some dumb stuff, which I don't get it.
Well, if Trump is elected again, Steve, and you're part of the EPA transition team again, maybe you'll run into him in the White House while he's collecting his government efficiency czar staff, and you can give him a cup of coffee and have a sit down and have that.
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, he's a smart guy. He's intellectually curious. He seems to like to learn new things about everything else. I mean, he's been open to becoming a conservative, right? Or at least open to supporting Trump and free speech. He gets that, but the climate stuff just goes.
Look, there's a lot of smart people in the world.
Yeah.
Just because you're smart doesn't mean you know everything or get everything right.
No, that's for sure.
I mean, look, I say what you will about Jeff Bezos. I do not think he's a stupid man. Evil, perhaps, but not stupid. And I don't think Musk is evil, but even as bright as you can be wrong.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. Well, so some of the other items here that may happen in a Harris administration, that would be an extension of the Biden administration, which is an extension of the Obama administration, and that is the administration of billions of dollars of our money, of taxpayer dollars, in so-called federal climate funds. We have a story here. I don't know if I'm reading it on my screen, so I don't know if Andy has it up on the screen yet, from The Hill, saying how this is back from April, but it says that 8 nonprofit institutions will administer $20 billion in federal funds designated for combating climate change and reducing pollution. This is from the, from the Inflation Reduction Act, which had nothing to do with inflation and had a lot to do with climate spending for all of these groups. So, the what's on the ballot here is whether, the cabal, the coordination between left-leaning climate alarmist nonprofits just basically lining their pockets with our money to be the in the street shock troops for climate action, which is basically the destruction of Western civilization and our way of life.
So far there's been $140 billion of Inflation Reduction Act money spent. Almost half of that money has gone to 5 battleground states. And when that bill passed, it occurred to me that this is just going to be walking around money. It's an old term for just buying votes, basically. And that's really what 34 states got 70 billion, and 5 states got 64 billion, and they're all battleground states. So you do the math.
No, right. You misunderstand, Steve. You're looking at that in a really bad light. In a bad light, as you probably don't realize. It just turns out that those 5 states are more affected by climate change than every other state around them. They are uniquely situated such that climate change affects them more.
No, it's just it's so dishonest. And the thing is that it's hard to get people interested in this. I mean, it should be pretty outrageous that the Biden-Harris administration is dropping tens of billions of dollars to get itself reelected, and Republicans are like, what? It's it's like when it gets to climate, Republicans just unplug their brains. They can't figure it out.
Well, I think it's because a lot of Republicans are afraid of, they're more afraid of being not wrong on the issue, but positioned as wrong by the media. I think despite the fact that Trump has been such a force for like untethering the Republican terror of the mainstream media, and what they, whether or not they're getting like good boy points from random journalists, I think despite that, major like mainstream Republicans are still intimidated at the
For
thought
sure.
of having a journalist say like, hit him with the kind of stuff that they hit Vance with at the debate, where they just like toss in their little comments at the end of the question. He gives them a solid answer about how we don't necessarily need to worry about that. We should worry about resilience. We can worry about, how the Biden-Harris administration don't even actually believe in what they're promoting, because all they're doing is exporting emissions to other countries. They're not actually cutting emissions. He made that point during the debate, and all the little moderator had to say real quick at the end was, and climate change existential threat that all scientists agree, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the media, they're like these dogs that smell fear, and Republicans, they're afraid of being asked about climate when they only need to know one thing and a little bit that they can come back to the media with, and the media will completely melt down because these guys know nothing either, right? I remember Gina McCarthy, who was Biden's EPA chief, or Obama's EPA chief, and Biden's climate czar. Once she was testifying in Congress, and a congressman from Texas, Joe Barton, asked her how much CO2 is in the atmosphere, she had no idea. And she was the EPA chief. And another time, Sessions, who was Trump's first AG, when he was a senator, he was asking her questions about the climate models and how they weren't working. She didn't know about that either. None of these people know anything. They know their talking points, and they know that Republicans are afraid, and that's how they succeed.
Yeah.
But that's what the problem is. Republicans don't want to be ridiculed, especially by certain media sources, which they think, I don't think it's true as much anymore, but which they think are inordinately influential. They're read by people that Republicans care about the opinion of. Yeah. And they don't want to not be invited to the right parties for being the wrong kind of guy, because there's a lot of that,
Right.
Every time you hear one saying my good friend, the truth is, I think a lot of them aren't good friends, but they sure want to be at the same parties.
They do.
Yeah, they do. Well, I want to ask two quick things, and then maybe we can talk about both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and how these things might be different. But one is EPA's power plant for greenhouse gas emissions. So they seem to keep putting out more stringent regulations on this topic, despite I thought there was a Supreme Court decision that might have slowed this down a little bit, but it did not. I know Sterling follows this topic very closely, as does Steve. And then there's just also the broad goal of net zero that is huge in Europe. The term net zero isn't used as much here in the United States, at least by politicians walking the soil of the United States. But you have climate czar John Kerry over in Europe and at the WEF talking about net zero and all of that. It's an obsession in Great Britain, net zero, and it's going to actually cause a political revolution very soon in that country. I actually predict. But Steve and the rest of the panel here, what about how would a Trump presidency affect the EPA's ever more stringent and unrealistic and not scientific, and it doesn't improve quality of life power plant restrictions differ if Donald Trump was president, and would the net zero project be dead forever if Donald Trump was elected president?
Well, so those are great questions. I think that, since Biden did everything administratively, Trump could roll back everything administratively. And he will also be supported by two new Supreme Court decisions, the one in 2022, West Virginia versus EPA, which said that EPA can only do what Congress authorized, and the one this year, which basically rolled back the Chevron decision, allowing federal agencies to just make up the law when there is none. So I think that everything Biden did that's important will be rolled back. And, of course, there's going to be, it'll be total war, as there will be on everything the Trump administration does. It'll just be total war. There will probably be preemptive suits, and there will be resistance from EPA staff and all federal agency staff. So we're all going to have a lot to do for the next 4 years, for sure.
The power plant rule has become a version of the wetlands rule. For decades now, the Supreme Court has said, no, you've gone too far on wetlands. You can't do what you're doing. And rather than saying specifically, rather than laying down the law and said, you can only cover wetlands that are adjacent to ports and major rivers, which ships can go down. And other than that, it's left to the states. The court's never given that guidance, but they keep saying the EPA's wetland rule is too big, is too large. They give these piddling significant nexus, which the EPA then uses to basically write a stricter rule. Yeah. And it gets sued, and the court strikes it down, after years. And they say, oh, we got the message this time. And they go back and write a new rule, which is even stricter. Now, under Trump, he wrote a rule that tried to comply with the court orders. And Biden came in, and Trump, just like Biden has been sued, Trump was sued over that rule. It was winding its way through the courts, and Biden came in and says, oh, we're no longer defending that rule. We're writing a new one so you can drop this, so the courts can drop the suit. The greenhouse gas rule is the same thing. Yeah. The courts have said you can't impose the kind of cost it imposes. It has to be done by Congress. It's a major questions. It has to be explicit, and it has to be imposed by Congress. And the EPA says, oh, we understand. And so they've come back with another rule, which still violates what the court has said.
Well, I think you're looking at a uniquely rogue administration. Recall the Supreme Court said that Biden could not just forgive student loans. So they just went back and, did it a different way. And so they did that with the power plant rule as well. I mean, Congress has still not authorized EPA to regulate power plants in the way that Biden EPA wants, but they're doing it anyway because, their real goal is just to throw a monkey wrench into the coal industry and the utility industry and cause chaos and make everybody even more dependent on government. And, that's just kind of the strategy. And, we have rogue, out of control government right now. And hopefully that can be fixed soon, or at least ameliorated.
For sure. All right. Well, let's get to the questions and answer portion of the program. Linnea, take it away.
Sweet. Thank you very much. Okay. So here's a question from Slaughter Bartfast, which comes right from the discussion we were just having. So I'm going to put it up now. And he says, does the EPA actually have lawmaking purview? Surely they are a non-elected body. Steve?
No, EPA can only do what Congress has authorized EPA to do. They can issue regulations that have been authorized by Congress. EPA has become a law unto itself, obviously. And it's very easy for EPA to get away with this because Republicans refuse to learn anything about the environment. I've been working on these issues for more than 30 years, and it's I can't tell you how many members and Republican staff I have met with over the decades, and it just it bounces off 95% of them. There are some of them that get it, but precious few. And of course, Democrats, they don't really know about any of this stuff. They don't either, and they don't care. But they're very good. They take the talking points from the green groups and move forth, and Republicans are completely disarmed.
How it works, Slaughter Bartfast, is Congress passes a law with broad generalizations, and it leaves it to the administrative agencies to interpret these things, to write the detailed regulations. And then when the regulations are costly or bad, they've done this with endangered species as well, Congress says, oh, well, we never intended that. Don't vote against us because of that, because that's a rogue agency doing what it wants to do. Basically, they are Pontius. We wash our hands. They're Pontius Pilate. Congress could act. And in fact, under Biden, they've acted more often than under any other administration, including with Democrats on board, passing resolutions saying these rules aren't in line with the law we passed. Unfortunately, the Congressional Review Act that allows these resolutions, that's open to presidential veto, and he's vetoed every one. Honestly, to my mind, there shouldn't be a veto over things like this. Congress wrote the law. The president signed the law. Congress knows what it intended when it wrote the law. And if it says we didn't intend that, that should be the last word on the matter. They shouldn't have to go through the executive to approve that. They should be able to go directly to court and say, we, Congress, who wrote this law, have said, and we're interested parties. We've written this law. We've said, this isn't what we said. Yeah. Strike it down.
Thank you very much. Okay, here's another one to the panel. Chris, who asks, how can the EPA's determination that CO2 is pollution be unwound?
Who's that for?
Anybody who wants to take it. It's a tough one.
Well, so EPA could start a rulemaking to undo. It's called the endangerment finding. EPA could undertake a rulemaking and undo it. The Trump EPA, a new Trump EPA, could do that. And I would love to see this litigated in court. Certainly, there would be evidence. There's a videotape of John Dingell, congressman from Michigan, now deceased, one of the authors of the Clean Air Act. And there's a video of him clearly in a House hearing saying, we never intended for EPA to regulate greenhouse gases. And we didn't say that expressly because we didn't imagine there would be a Supreme Court stupid enough, and those are his words, or dumb enough to allow that to happen. And of course, in 2007, in Massachusetts v. EPA, that's exactly what a Supreme Court did. 5-4. So, the good news is that Trump EPA could unwind it. And this time, I hope they do.
Well, I hate to disagree with Steve, but I'm going to say I don't think the EPA can unwind it. Precisely for what you said, Steve. The court ruled it. The EPA didn't rule it was pollution. The court ruled it was pollution. Well, and what they then told the EPA was that, and if it's pollution, and we say it is, any emission under the court's ruling is pollution.
Well, I disagree with you, Sterling, because the ruling of the court is that EPA could regulate CO2 if it found it was pollution. And of course, as soon as Obama came in, the Obama EPA found that CO2 was pollution. They started regulating. Trump EPA could find that it's not pollution and unwind it.
No, when I read I guess we're going to disagree, but my reading of it was the court said any emission qualifies as pollution. All the EPA has to determine is whether it's an endangerment. Not all pollution may be dangerous, but if this endangers anyone, then you have the right to regulate it. And that's what the EPA did, is they issued an endangerment finding. Okay, here's a pollutant. The court said it's an emission, so it's a pollutant. And thus, we just got to determine whether it's an endangerment. And they looked at the IPCC and they said the IPCC says it's endangering us. So we've issued our endangerment finding, which gives us the right to regulate it.
That's a whole nother kettle of fish, but I think that EPA could unwind it.
Okay.
There's all sorts of petitions. I think Heartland might even be a party to some of these petitions
to overturn the endangerment finding.
Yes, because EPA could do that.
And EPA can say it's not endangerment, but I don't think they can say it's not pollution. I think a new court has to.
The Supreme Court has not ruled that CO2 is pollution.
Anthony, jump in here.
I'll send you links after the show.
They have called it pollution in dicta, but it's not binding or anything like that.
Okay. All right. All of the legal rhetoric aside, I think you have to go right back to the science. And here's how I view it. Carbon dioxide is part of the natural life cycle of everything on Earth, literally. I mean, it is key to photosynthesis. And without carbon dioxide, everything stops. So the whole idea of net zero is ridiculous. But, we could point out that it would be just as ridiculous to call water vapor a pollutant. water vapor is also something generated by mankind in voluminous amounts, and it goes into the atmosphere, right? And it is also a greenhouse gas. And so let's get rid of all the water vapor and we'll all walk around like dried up mummies. You know, that's the kind of logic that we need to apply here. We need to go back to the science and say carbon dioxide is part of the natural world. It is not a pollutant, and don't treat it as such. I mean, other things, you know, like chlorofluorocarbons, you know, CFCs in the atmosphere with ozone, yes, those are pollutants. Those are man-made pollutants that are not part of the natural world. We need to make sure that the court understands and separates this distinction.
Anthony, that's a great point. Water vapor, CO2 should be likened to water vapor. You know, if you're going to regulate CO2, you got to regulate water vapor too, which would be impossible.
Right. And my only point of disagreement with Steve is maybe because I'm just a pessimist after being in this for a much briefer amount of time than you guys have. But I'm looking around and seeing the way that Republicans typically talk about carbon dioxide, and they talk about it as though it is a pollutant.
Yeah.
And that is a major problem.
Yeah,
We've got stuff going through right now
Right.
where they are trying to put together a like a committee to do an accounting on all of our businesses in the United States to determine how bad of pollutants from carbon dioxide our businesses are, so that they can brag about it against China.
Yeah,
Allegedly.
no, that's absolutely
Like,
true. You know, on top of just the intellectual hurdle, there is the hurdle that, you know, the wind and solar and carbon capture industries, and even the oil industry, you know, they all have ways of making money off the green new scam. And so they're all going to be very hesitant about supporting any rollback of that. A lot of these companies, just in their own, you know, language in their public statements, you know, if you're a publicly owned company, you can't lie, right? You can't lie. It's illegal. And if they have to walk back any of this climate stuff, they're going to be subject to all sorts of litigation for making crazy statements about global warming. So it's a very complicated issue. But in my view, the EPA could roll back the notion that CO2 is a pollutant and is endangering the planet and all that.
Well, and here's a comment from one of our viewers, Bo Gus, who's always here. And he says, Steve, please use any poll you have to get Trump to fund only climate research that foresees global cooling. Let's see how robust that global warming science really is.
Well, what do you mean? We are cooling, right, Anthony? It's been cooling for the last
after
million years or something.
Yeah, after the 2015, 2016 El Nino, yes, we're very slowly going down. Although we did get a spike last year and we went back up due to the water vapor from Hunga Tonga and also the El Nino last year, it's coming down again. So, you know, this is just natural variation in progress. The only problem that we've got as humans is we have such short lifespans in terms of how the world and geologic time operates. We don't have records back very far. And so we haven't observed events like this before, even though they've happened before.
You know, Anthony, the Washington Post ran a graph a month ago, I think, showing that the Earth has been cooling for 485 million years. And those global temperatures are as valid as any global temperature today. So, and I think, Anthony, you said this, you know, is the Earth warming or cooling? Well, how far back do you want to go, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was a great graph too. And, you know, it backfired on them because, you know, it was clearly not a crisis today compared to what it was, you know, 50 million years ago.
So we've got this this question here, which kind of segues from what we were just saying. In Europe, there's a photo doing the rounds of a Roman road that has been uncovered because of glacier retreat. Is this real? And if it's real, it's great for our case against the green left. And I think I'd pitch this one to Anthony because we've covered this quite a few times on this kind of thing, quite a few times on climate realism.
Yeah, you know, the point is that this kind of stuff happens all the time. We have glaciers that are receding, and then they uncover remnants of past civilizations or people hiking up in the mountains or whatever it was, agriculture in Greenland, that kind of thing. So when the glaciers retreat and you find this stuff, you know, whatever it might be, you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute, how could it have been warmer back then when there was no ice to allow this stuff to happen versus today? Because isn't today the only crisis that we have? And that's what a lot of the media completely misses, because none of these students that come out of college today can think logically. They can't think for themselves. They can only regurgitate what is told to them by their scientific masters. And so they don't question these things when they very well should be.
Yeah, no, when they find these artifacts, it's really funny. Invariably, the key piece of information is that the glacier's retreating. That's how we found the artifact. But they never ask how the artifact get there in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
Whether
obvious.
it's trees or the hunger stones or whatever it is.
Yeah, there was a story I covered a while ago in Climate Change Weekly about what they found was basically what was tantamount to a highway in the past. This trail in I forget which Scandinavian country, where people have been traveling it evidently for hundreds of years, with lots of scattered what we would call today trash, but their bones, some furs, all sorts of things, tools, things like that. And it recently got uncovered, and it's like, well, hold it. That means that you age these things, and back then people were traveling this route, and they said, "Oh, that's right. Yeah, people were traveling this route." You get woodcuts from the 1500s, where you see a Scandinavian mountain village about to be wiped off the map because of the expanding glaciers. And back then they weren't happy about the fact, when the glaciers started to retreat, the people in that village weren't unhappy about the fact. Now, of course, that was before we had a global ski industry, and now they can profit off the glaciers and want them to stick, even if it wipes a whole city off the map. But it's ridiculous. No history at all.
We have a few more questions. I'm going to try and get to them quick. I've got two here for Anthony from Kite Man Music that I'm also curious about the answer to these. So we're going to go. First question, is AMOC slowing down? And you might want to say what that is.
Well, the answer to that is yes, no, and maybe. Because it's like every year,
Wow.
Oh, it's speeding up. No, wait, it's slowing down. Oh, no, it's catastrophe in the making. It's going to collapse. Every year they flip-flop on this, and it's all model-based, and it's all a load of crap. I'm sorry, that's what it is. It's model-based science that keeps predicting completely opposites every year. We've got stories at Climate Realism where you can go back and look at, the AMOC is speeding up, the AMOC is speeding down, the AMOC is going to collapse, the AMOC is going to speed up and roast us all, whatever. None of these things have any basis in reality. They're all, as Steve Milloy likes to point out, PlayStation climatology.
What is the AMOC?
The Atlantic
Meridional overturning circulation. Basically, it's part of the Gulf Stream.
Now, Anthony,
Okay,
I think there was a study that came out last month under the Washington Post report. It may have been something in Nature, where they said that the way they've been measuring the AMOCs with some sort of submarine cable, and they failed to account for the change in the Earth's magnetic field, and the current is as strong as it's ever been.
That was for the Gulf Stream that feeds into the Atlantic, and I covered that I think last week or the week before in Climate Change Weekly. Yes.
I thought it was AMOC, but
no, this is the Gulf Stream.
Yeah, just to clarify, because
Never
we were
mind.
all talking before, the AMOC is the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, and basically it is the conveyor belt that brings warmer water from the tropics up to the Arctic, and then it sinks, then it comes back down. And it's part of the planet's regulatory temperature system, its own thermostat. And so that's why the climate scientists are so freaked out about it, because they're afraid the thermostat's going to break and we're all going to roast, or we're all going to freeze, like you saw on The Day After Tomorrow, which was one of the worst climate science-based movies ever to be produced, even so bad that Gavin Schmidt at NASA GIST said it was bad. So when he's dissing it, it's bad.
okay. I got to fact check Sterling. It was the AMOC in that study that they used the submarine cable on. So there you go. I'll send it to you after.
Okay,
We're
you can do
warring
that.
here.
You can do
Okay.
that.
Here's our next question. So are we expecting a cold winter this year?
Yes,
And
in
where?
some parts of the United States and not in other parts.
Yeah. It's tough to say. That's for sure. Okay, let's see. Here we go. From Chris, he asks, has Trump promised to leave the Paris Agreement again? I'm hoping that might encourage other countries like mine to follow suit if he does, before we all die from cold, hunger, and poverty.
Yeah, I don't think I can't recall him mentioning it, but I know that it's high on everybody's list of priorities. Some of us think that the way to get out of it is for him to recognize the Paris Climate Agreement as a treaty and submit it to the Senate, where the Senate can kill it and be done with it once and for all.
I hope that if he does get out of it, he drives a stake through the heart of it to prevent us from ever getting back into it.
Yeah. If tyrannical lockdowns didn't reduce the dreaded CO2 levels, what kind of scenario would reduce it to the UN's liking, and how could they do that? I think the trick answer to that question is there is no level that would reduce it, or there is no level that they have in mind that they would reduce it to. And therefore, this is an infinite scam that they can forever raise money off of. That's my thought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, John Kerry's goal is to suck out of the atmosphere all the CO2 that's been put there since industrialization, which is about 1.6 trillion tons, which would, probably cost $2 quadrillion to do. So, yeah, no, it's a long-term scam for sure.
I just heard John Kerry suck, and the rest of it just kind of went,
And this is kind of a related question, so I'll put it up too. How will we know if that $20 billion improved the climate?
Oh, you can't improve the climate for $20 billion. It has to be $20 trillion. And then it'll move it maybe 1/10 of a degree. Maybe.
That's right. We just need a couple more $1 trillion, and then the weather will be good forever.
Yes, and eating bugs. Yeah.
The theme of today's show was about climate and the presidential election. I think we did a pretty good job of laying out scenarios of what may or may not happen, depending on what is it now, 10 days until the election? It's amazing. It's amazing. So whichever way the election turns out, this Climate Realism Show will still be here every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Central, to go over the crazy climate news of the week, to bring on fantastic guests like the one we had today, Steve Milloy. So thank you all for watching and listening to this podcast. If you're only listening to the audio version, please, every time you are curious about the climate, visit climaterealism.com, visit climateataglance.com, visit What's Up With That. Always go to heartland.org. And of course, we cannot forget the great junkscience.com, who is one of our streaming partners, along with CFAC, Climate Depot, and the aforementioned What's Up With That. Thank you all for being here this week, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
How dare you!